All right, so today I'm going to go through a process of creating a brief offline app. I'm going to walk us through quickly the deck and try to put some ground rules on what we're going to do and give you a little bit of information. So first, I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Brent Mason. I'm a CSG Pro low-code developer. I also have my roots deeply into product management and business analyst work. So I do that as well as doing Power Apps development, but I do love development. I started developing back when I was in 8th grade, back on the Apple II Plus, for those of you who remember what a 6502 was and when people actually coded real assembly language. But we've moved on from those days to apps you don't have to do a lot of coding in. So this is my opportunity to show you some of that. All right, I'm going to walk you through a couple use cases, talk about the goals of what we're going to try to accomplish here today, talk to you about what I'm not going to cover, which could be a lot, but just a couple of specific topics. Talk about the keys to building a successful offline app, talk about some of the limitations of an offline app, and then we're actually going to get it and we're going to see if we can build this thing and get this all done in 30 minutes. So I didn't start my timer, but I'm actually going to start that right now, knowing that I got a couple extra minutes under the belt already. All right, so I want to talk about some use cases. One of the things that obviously comes to mind, at least to me, real quickly, is if you're in an area that doesn't have cell phone or any other type of access. So if you're a farmer, you're out in the boonies, you need to collect some data, offline Power App might be a solution for you. If you are outside of cell phone or excuse me, a Wi-Fi range, and the boss says, you know what, I don't have any budget to extend the Wi-Fi, and you're not getting a cell phone. How are you going to go around your property and take information and collect that information? So that's another possible use case. Another use case is when you're in a poor reception area, not only just local cell, but if you are in like a manufacturing environment where you have a lot of pipes and iron or other sorts of metal that interfere with radio signals, this might be an opportunity for you to use a Power App with be an offline capability. As I was putting this deck together, I suddenly said, you know what? You can make an offline brochure. So if you want to have a catalog all loaded up on a device or have an app that someone downloaded and actually have that offline experience, you could actually download and cache all that data into the app, go into offline mode, and do your demonstration or help your customer look through the catalog that way. And that kind of leads sort of into the last bullet point there is just caching data in advance to avoid redundant data source activity, so you're not hitting the same data source again and again and again. And you can do that for a pretty large table, as well as just a simple list of values, and also that's going to reduce the bandwidth that you are using through the app. All right, so goals from today is to collect data and put that data into a SharePoint list. This is going to be input-only application. I'm not going to trying to do any editing or anything like that. It can certainly be done, but we're going to keep things brief and simple. The data, when not connected, the data needs to be stored on the device and be able to stay there. The data needs to be able to stay available that we've stored when the device is powered off. As well as when you switch between applications, and the application might, or the Android or iPhone might actually, kill your application to make room for another one if it needs that memory. And then we also need to have the ability to upload offline records when we're connected. What I'm not going to try to accomplish today is any type of data synchronization with the master data source. As I mentioned, input only. Not going to do any kind of conflict resolution. Hey, 2 records, which one are you going to choose, or anything like that. So we're just literally going to be adding to the SharePoint list as part of this demonstration here. So some of the keys that I think are important to know for a successful online and offline app here is particularly looking at the connection signal. And I was doing a little research online, and it's actually called signals. They're things, outside events that occur that the Power Apps respond to, and the particular one we're interested in is called connected, and it's either true or false. Either you're connected or you're not. That makes things pretty simple. One of the things I liked about this, and I didn't have much time to experiment with this because I was just reading the fine print in the details before the meeting today, but this actually, when this state changes, it calls and does a refresh of any of the formulas using that. So I think that means you can get some instant response. I haven't tested that yet, but I'm hoping that's the case. If you haven't done any offline data work, then you probably haven't used the save data or load data functions. But as a save data, you simply say, here's the collection name I want you to save, and here's the file name or the name I want you to have on the device to save that. Loading data is very simple also, just to the reverse. What collection do I want to load data from? What's the name of that file? And then there's an additional flag that's a true or false saying ignore if there's a non-existent file, meaning if I try to load a data file and it's not there, and we're going to use this option, just ignore that, don't throw in there. Otherwise, we'll say, hey, I tried to load a data file, there was a problem with that. If you're familiar with collections, then you've used clear and clear collect. But for those of you that aren't familiar with that, clear simply removes the records out of a collection, and clear collect removes those records and then gathers additional records and puts those in there. So lots of data on that information on the Microsoft Docs. All right, 3 key areas to the app to make sure if you have these 3, I think, whatever else you put around that will work. But these are the 3 key areas. The on start for the application. That event is important because if you have data that you've stored in offline mode, the device has been powered down. This is the area where you read that back into the device. You need to know how to save the record because when you're saving the record, if you're offline, okay, you need to store it in your offline cache. If you're online, you just submit the form. You will, if you've done this before, you all know how to submit a form. No magic going on there. And then the third area that we need to focus in on is submitting of the offline records. So now we come back online. How do we submit those? For this demo here, I'm going to use a button. You could also use a timer saying every so many minutes or seconds, check and see if the connection is available. If so, upload the records you've collected offline. And then the signal, which I mentioned in the previous state or previous slide, whether we're connected or not. I think when that changes state, that could trigger an event that could actually make that stuff upload. I haven't experimented with that, so stand by for news on that. All right, I want to quickly talk about the limits of what the app can do. So if you are building this in the web, which I am, and if you try to run it from a web player, you're going to find out that you cannot persist your data because you can't save a file from the web browser. At least Power Apps doesn't do that at this point. So if you're going to test this, we actually have to do this on a device, and I will be using my phone. I'll see how I can actually show it up in front of the screen. I had pretty good luck with that to show you the finished app. The other thing is you have to be aware that your device has memory limits. Okay, our phones have limits in gigabytes and megabytes, not terabytes. And so per the Microsoft Docs, they said about 30 to 70 megabytes per app. In the context that I'm building an app in today, just adding some records to a SharePoint list, I'm guessing I could probably keep a couple thousand in there. I haven't tried that to know. But if I was storing things like picture data, signature data, other blob type data where you've got large data sets, that 30 to 70 megabytes could be eaten up pretty quickly. So just something to be aware of. All right, you guys ready to build? All right, I'm going to switch over here, and Greg, if you let me know when you can see the correct slide here. I believe this is where I want to go.
There we go. Popping the hood on Power Apps.
All right, thank you for that. All right, so I did take the liberty of setting up the UI, some basic things. I didn't do any of the programming on there, but I didn't think we need to spend a whole lot of time me dragging and dropping stuff on the screen. But I'm going to tell you quickly, briefly, what I did put on the screen here. 2 screens. This is our main screen. We're going to have a little text area that's going to tell us whether online or offline. We have a gallery, which is going to connect up to the data source. I will load in the form real quick, connect that to the data source. And we'll use that for our input. I'm going to change this button here in the lower left corner to be just a navigation button that's going to take us to the other screen. And then this is going to become our save data button, and we'll talk about how to load that up. Quickly on the other screen, this is going to be a status bar. I've already wired up the navigation. We're going to have some gallery that looks at the collection, as well as a button to submit the offline data. So that's going to be the entirety of the app. One thing I love about this demonstration is I can honestly say I can't do it all inside the web. So I'm actually going to, as I mentioned before, we'll have the cell phone up here, and I'll actually demonstrate the app once it's completed. But this will be a pre-made app, just to be honest about that. I'm not going to try to do all the magic here online. All right, so let's get started with that. And I got my to-do list over here. Got about 5 or 6 things to do on the first screen and 4 or 5 on the second, and we're going to see how quickly we can get done with that. So I'm not going to start out with the onStart event, but that's something we're going to need to come back to. We're going to get to that here in just a minute here. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and work on the title text here. And I've done a fair amount of cheating ahead of time, so I've gotten some stuff to cut and paste, because I know we all love to see how great I can type. And if you've worked with me in a meeting, you know I do okay, but I could do better. So quickly to walk you through this statement, it's just, whoops, I'm actually going to close it so we can see it better. But it's simply just a text string here from SharePoint, and then append that, and then an if statement. And here's our special statement, if connected, right? Connection.connected. If that's true, then say we're connected. Otherwise, say we're offline. And so for purposes of what you're going to see on this screen, this is all you're going to say connected, because if I go into offline mode with the demonstration here, my party is going to be over, and we move on to the next presenter. But all right, so we got that in there. So I'm going to check that off. This is the project manager in me who's just checking off the items here. Nextly, I'm going to quickly wire up the gallery to the data source here. Oh, look, there it is already waiting for me. And I do want to quickly look and just see which items do we want. I don't want this format, so I'm just going to go with a title and subtitle here. I could go with more, and amazingly, it actually lines up with what I already have in SharePoint. And I do want to, as I'm doing this, I do want to take a quick moment and jump over and just quickly show you the data source. In SharePoint, here we have just 3 fields in here. I have title, a list of options to choose, and location. And just to show I don't have any cards up my sleeve, I'm going to refresh that data source here. All right, pop back over here. I'm not going to wire up any of the navigation on the data source, but know that you could do that quite easily. All right, so we've wired up the gallery. I can check that off. Moving on to wiring up the form. Connect to the data. There we go. Edit the fields. Actually, I'm going to get to data source here. Got that already loaded in. I didn't spend the time, on the call here to load in the data source. But if you need any help connecting to the data source, just let me know. Or there's lots of YouTube videos out there to help you out with that. So we magically loaded in all the fields here. And now there's one field at the bottom, which is called attachments, which I'm not interested in capturing that data today. So I'm just going to go ahead and hide that. I'm going to remove that.
Hey, Brent, do you have zoom in by any chance, or zoom it?
No, I
if
can
you
make
don't,
something.
no worries.
What would you like to see bigger?
I was just wondering if you had zoom it to, oh, whoa, okay. There we go.
I can zoom in on that a little bit bigger. Unfortunately, I probably can make some of the other stuff bigger, but.
All good. I was just wondering.
Okay, I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller here, but there we go. Okay. All right, so I believe that has our form wired in. I'm just going to come press play here just to quick. Let's see here. This is what I always forget to do here. I want to force, and this is where I'm going to go back to the onStart on the screen here. And I think I did new form 1, but I do want to force this into, let's see. This is in the on visible. There we go. Whoops, not visible. That's the screen. All right, get that new form mode, and I'm just going to run this. And now let's see if our form. There we go. All right, and got a list of values here, and location shows up. Excellent. All right, so our form is pulling data in from the data source. So I can check that off our list here. All right, and now I'm going to quickly set up our navigate button here. So I'm just going to say the text on this here to set. I always like doing things the harder way, right? All right, I'm just going to call this offline data with a capital O. There we go. And then it's going to go ahead to the on select event. There we go. I'm simply going to navigate that to the other form. And for those of you who've done Power Apps for a little bit, you're really familiar with this. For those of you new, this is simply just moving to the other screen. And I love to do some transition, and I like this case. I want to do the uncover the magic data beneath that. All right, so we've got that wired up now. All right, and the last but not least, and I guess the most important of this particular part is the save button. Okay, so I'm going to quickly fix the text on this and just make this say save. You can see how good my typing is, and now you know I do cutting and pasting. All right, and now we're going to do for the on select event. This is what happened when we click the button, and I'm going to expand this out and drop it down because this is a little bit more. All right. I'm going to paste this in here. Now I'm going to walk us through this line by line here. So this is an if statement that's set up there, and if statement, basically the first item is what's the logical test or the condition, and if it's connected, right, this is going to come back true, which is an execute submit form. All right, we're all familiar as Power Apps developers with submit form. It just loads the data in, no magic there at all. If you're familiar with the process, where the magic does come in is in this statement here. All right, this is where we have the collection. What this is doing is it's saying, take the collection and add records to my offline records. And here, I was fortunate enough that the fields I used, the card name, data card values were the same as when I cut and paste this earlier. Otherwise, we'd have to fix that. But basically saying into the title field of the collection, put the text for the first field, and then take the other two values and put that into list of options to choose and location. And then after that's done, we take and we save that to the My Offline records. All right, so now we've stored that inside the device. So at this point, if the device is shut down, loses power, for whatever reason, our data should be safe. And then I just, for safety purposes, put the form back in new mode so I can get another form or another record in there. All right, excellent. So we're about halfway done with this part of it. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to add some data to the offline screen here. First thing I want to do is I'm going to go up and update the title here. And once again, I cheated and I grabbed my handy dandy cut and paste. So once again, just a string, and then if connected, once again, if true, it's going to say connected. Otherwise, it's going to say offline. And click right there, and this doesn't quite fit. So we're going to just drag that out there. There we go. And the purpose of this, once again, was to show that we are on the screen that shows the stored records, the one that is in the collection. I'm going to wire this up to the collection now. If you noticed before, our last time we were looking to wire up the gallery, we didn't have this My Offline Records. Well, where did this come from? If I quickly go back over here to my main screen, when I added this code in here and talked about the My Offline Records collection, and I'll just say magically, or every once in a while Power Up does something magically, it knew and it put it in the collection. If we go over here, look at collections, we can see there it is. It even has the fields in there already for me, ready to go. So I'm going to pop back over to that screen here, and I'm going to wire this up to My Offline Records. Now, I don't have any offline records to show you because I can't take you offline in this mode to even put it in there, so we're going to have to take some of this on faith. It does make, when you're developing this stuff, a little bit of a challenge, right? Because you're working on this, and how do I test it? How do I see this, if this works? How do I get the records to go there? I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into there, but it's pretty simple. If on my save, if I were just to take and replace this connected, right, with the word true or false, it's going to go one path or the other. If you make it false and it goes offline, I'm actually going to get an error because I cannot save this on the web app. So you have to remark some of these things out. Then it'll put it in the collection. You can get, I call it the pseudo offline functionality, but test to make sure everything works as best you can before you download it to the phone app. Or if you just want to push it onto the phone, go for it, have fun. You're not going to hurt anything. All right, so let's quickly go back over here and let's see. So we've done the title. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to do quickly, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, is go into the button and the display mode here. And unfortunately, this is always going to be disabled for us, but, and I was going to cut and pasted it. Display mode and paste this in there. Simply, this is going to say, if I'm connected, don't allow me, allow me to submit. If I'm not connected, well, then I can't submit, so disable the button. All right, so I'm connected here, so I can submit. And then I'm going to change the text on this button here real quick. Just simply to say upload.
So one thing to ask you, Brent, while you're doing this, so Power Apps actually understands when the device that it's deployed onto is on a Wi-Fi or has data or not?
Well, it knows when it's connected or not, and then there's another thing on there called the metered, so it can tell you whether you're on a metered connection or not. Now, what officially defines a metered connection? If that means cell phone, I couldn't tell you. I haven't messed with that one, but there is a way to know if you are on some form of metered connection.
So a metered connection would be like if you're at a cafe and they are throttling the internet connection somehow. I mean, a lot of times I'm at Starbucks and it's a metered connection.
Yeah, I couldn't say what the official definition of metered. In my mind, meter would be, hey, my data plan only has 2 gigabytes. Maybe that's the same thing at the coffee shop. So, yeah, I can do a little bit of research and we can get some more information out to the guys about that.
Again, just pretty amazing that out of the box Power Apps can work so synchronously with your device.
Absolutely. All right, so going to do a little more cutting and pasting, and this is probably the most complicated statement for the entire demo here. So we're going to spend a couple seconds and walk through this here.
Yep.
So,
and Chuck went ahead and put the definition of metered connection. Thank you so much, Chuck.
Cool. I'll have to review that after I'm done here. All right, let's see. So just to put all this into context, I was on the previous screen. I've loaded some records into the offline data cache because I'm offline, and now I'm now connected again. I want to upload these records to the data source, which would be SharePoint. All right, so when I put this code in here, let me go back to it, and I'm going to walk you through this here real quick. All right, so there's a for all loop. Basically, it says for each one of the records in the collection, so either 1 or 20 or 500, depending on how many of those I have, it uses the patch command. Personally, patch is not my favorite command, but in this case, it works. In this case, I'm going to create a new record using the default. So what data source am I updating? In this case, list for testing and Power Apps. What am I doing? The default values, and you just pull this in here. And then what values am I sending back? Now, I'm not sending back, in this case, the last value, which is location. So I'm going to just take a moment and type this in here. And this is also location. All right, if I did my work right, I didn't get any errors. Excellent. So this is basically going to loop through each one of the records, okay, that's in the collection and put it into the SharePoint list. Then I'm going to clear off my collection that's basically my internal data store because I don't want to upload these records twice by accident and duplicate my records. Then using the save data, I'm going to save that empty data store, if you will, back to the hard drive or to the device so that once again, that information is wiped off the device so I don't create duplicates again. All right, so we have one other piece of code to put in here, which is super important, and this is what makes things come back to life if you've lost power or your device has gone down for any reason, and that's in the on-start event. And once again, I'm going to use some magic of cutting and pasting, and let's see how this works for me. And simply, those statements are load data. So when I first start the app, the very, very, very first thing I do, and obviously use your judgment. There may be things you need to do before this in the on start, but I load the data in. If I use this particular flag of saying, if the file doesn't exist, don't throw an error. It's cool, not a big deal. And immediately I turn around and I save that data back to the device. In this case, since I'm using my form for data entry only, I use the new form. All right, so that is it for what I programmed in, and I said as much as I would love to show you how all this works, and I'm actually going to sort of do my best. So we're just going to click the play button here, and I put a new record on the SharePoint list. So I'm going to say online record, and I'm going to cross my fingers, obviously, that everything works, and I hit the save button here, and there it is. All right, let's check our SharePoint data source. Then hit that old refresh button here, and there's the online record. Okay, so we know at least as far as we can test this application, this record is working. So exciting there. All right, so I'm going to stop the screen share, and I'm going to go into.
We got a question for you, Mr. Brent.
Sir, what's up?
If many records have to be committed at one time, say data from 24 fields under a collection, is it better to denormalize the backend table so the Power App writes back to one row? Any way to design it to write back to a normalized table?
Yeah, so I would recommend writing, well, and there's obviously ways around. So I would recommend, I mean, if your data source, I'm just going to say has fields A, B, C, and D, and then E, F, G, and H, I would literally write those fields back in that order. You know, I wouldn't necessarily, and once again, everything is, you know, dependent on the situation. You might want to just load stuff and have a stored procedure grab the data and handle that heavy lifting on SQL. You know, one of the things I tell all my clients is, you know, when the going gets tough, I get a stored procedure. You know. And so I'm not sure if that directly addressed your question. I hope so. If not, you know, please hit me up. I will, you know, do a little more discussion with you to make sure I understand, you know, the question in depth so I can give you the best answer.
Krill, feel free to chime in, man.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Brent. Yeah, we'll take this offline. There's a lot more details. Thank you.
Cool.
I appreciate it.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to go into my Power App here. Actually, I'm going to shut my Power App down here, so hopefully my data sources are all clean. And all right, let's see here. So pushing the button. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this. This is not going to be the easiest thing in the world. And Chuck, I remember you said you could see this okay a little bit, so I'm just going to kind of, if I can sort of see the contrast, I'll go there. So here you can see the records that we had from the SharePoint list. Okay, and I'm going to add another record from this particular device. I'm not going to have to make you watch. I'm just going to say online to.
Brent, it looked good. I could see it fun.
Excellent. All right, and I'm just going to say second choice. Okay, so you can see we've got a little item added in there. I'm going to press the save button. And let's see, I think it showed up on the list almost instantly, and I'm going to refresh the SharePoint list. I'm not going to show you that, but yep, it's right over here in SharePoint. Okay, so now I'm going to go into airplane mode on the device here. So now we're in airplane mode. You can see that right there. And before I could even do anything to get back, you notice right up here at the top, SharePoint said offline mode. I mean, it happens like that. You know, I've seen it.
I think that's a great UI decision. A great UI decision, Brent, just so like your end user knows, you know, where they're at.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to quickly enter one that says offline, and I'm going to choose a third choice, and then I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to save it here, and it's saved. Now notice it didn't show up on the list there, because this is actually looking at what was online. I'm going to go to my offline cache button here. And here, if you can see there, you can see that has that record in there. All right, now I am going to share my screen here and refresh it just so we can take a quick peek at, so I'm going to refresh here, and you can see I'm refreshing, and the offline record is not there, which is exactly what I would hope to see. If I didn't see that, I'd be a little disappointed that you can still see we have it in the cache, and we'll pull back there. And once again, my submit button is not active. All right, so I'm just going to stay on this screen, and I'm going to go here. Actually, I'm going to go back. My apologies, and I'm going to go put it into off of airplane mode here. So immediately, almost. We'll see how long it takes. If I switch to offline mode, here you can see what's in the cache, and it's still offline. We'll see how long it takes to connect back up. So it's going to take a second for it to connect up to the cell. Let's see here. Oops, offline. Has it connected back up? It's connected. Oh, and there it is. Okay, now it says connected. All right, I'm going to go back to my offline cache here. You can see the record is there. And now I'm going to press the submit button, and hopefully it should immediately disappear. All right, disappeared there. I'm going to flip back to the other screen. And whoops, got to actually make the button trigger. There we go. And now you can see, if you can see that new option there is at the bottom. And I'm also going to go over to SharePoint and refresh this screen here. And there we have the record that was offline. So, all right, guys, that concludes what I had as far as I'll call it the prepared remarks. So I want to take and say thank you to everybody for taking the time to watch this. Hope you learned something. Offline stuff is not very hard. You know, I was concerned about, when I first did this, is this going to really work? You know, I did a lot of things with Power Apps, and you think it's going to work, and it doesn't work, and then you find out why. But in this case, it actually worked really good. So if you've been having any challenges with your Power Apps or have some questions, need some help, you know, feel free to reach out to me. I'm with CSG Pro. You know, I love Power Apps. I love low-code development. I love everything I do about consulting. So, you know, in that vein, I'm going to turn it back over to Greg, who I know loves his job.